Hello, Sahi colleagues. For this project, I interviewed a coworker named Matt, who previously served as the director for a learning center at a small community college. This learning center was the central hub for tutoring, writing consultation, as well as academic success coaching. Matt was the sole hiring authority and supervisor for a staff of over 25 professional and paraprofessional employees. While this assignment stated that it was unnecessary to go through each of Nash's criteria in order, I found this to be particularly useful for providing an ethical consultation for Matt's dilemma. In the following narration, I will work through the situation that Matt shared with me by using Nash's framework, or the problem-solving brief methodology. Matt's ethical dilemma arose when he was tasked with hiring a new chemistry tutor for the Learning Center. As the director, he had a desire to diversify his racially homogeneous staff, and so he was quietly happy to discover that a well-qualified candidate identified as a person of color. Matt was confronted by a challenge, however, when the candidate's references failed to support his qualifications for the position. Of the 3 references the candidate provided, one explained that he was frequently absent from work, showed up late and left early on a regular basis, and never gave his notice for leaving his most recent position. The 2 other references failed to respond, despite multiple attempts to contact them. Normally, this would disqualify a candidate, but Matt wondered if he should do so for this particular individual, considering his racial identity. The moral themes presented by this situation have to do with equity in hiring, as well as social justice practices, and racism. It is important to distinguish that this is not about equal opportunity, but rather about using race as a mitigating factor to hire a candidate despite poor references. While the answer to this question of using race as a justifier in this situation should come easily, the answer is no, obviously, the case is found to be much more nuanced when continuing to use Nash's problem-solving brief. When addressing the conflicts in the dilemma, it is easy to see why equal opportunity and affirmative action in higher education continue to be debated topics in political and legal spheres. For example, as the hiring authority, Matt is made to be the primary moral agent in regards to considering race as a factor, thereby taking a complex social construction and placing it in the hands of a single individual. While conflicts in this situation are social, the consequences of Matt's decision are more personal. Stakeholders are not limited to the candidate and the supervisor, but the decision also impacts the students that Matt is interested in supporting. As the final bit of analysis prior to the consultation, I reviewed the consequences and principles at play and the options available to Matt. There are 2 potential outcomes for hiring the candidate. One possibility is that despite poor references, the candidate could be a great asset to Matt's team and would also be part of Matt's beginning to diversify his staff. The more likely outcome from hiring the candidate would result in an irresponsible absentee employee. Furthermore, this outcome would result in hiring a candidate solely for his racial identity, which is clearly racist. The outcomes for not hiring the candidate are tangibly stronger from an ethical standpoint. 2 possibilities likewise exist for this course of action. 1. Not hiring avoids following through on the racist thought that hiring a person of color by itself will improve the center's engagement with social justice practices. The second outcome for not hiring avoids the trouble of needing to discipline a problematic employee with a pattern of tardiness and absence. This would also avoid failing the students who would come to expect his availability for tutoring. The final categories in Nash's problem-solving brief lend themselves easily to the consultation in this case. I started by exploring some viable alternatives with Matt, which included the suggestion that he did not need to make this decision by himself. In my experience, I have noticed that well-intended white people, including myself, struggle to discuss issues of racial bias out of fear of being perceived as racist and discriminatory. This is a major problem for addressing our own implicit biases and developing ally behavior. Matt and I discussed the importance of being able to ask colleagues and friends to check us on our assumptions. Finally, I questioned Matt on why he conducted this search by himself. It also struck me as a violation of professional standards for hiring, considering the fact that having multiple voices in the decision-making process can help avoid discriminatory hiring. The previous suggestions supported Matt's background beliefs and that he sees himself as an ally and a social justice advocate. While this is good, it's also important for Matt to recognize his multiple privileged identities as a white man in an administrative position. Talking through Matt's background beliefs and possible alternative approaches to the situation also aligned well with his initial intuitions. While it is possible that the reference was intentionally negative or vindictive, the likelihood of this is minimal because the reference has very little stake in the candidate's hiring. Additionally, Matt's initial thoughts were that this candidate had the option to list 3 references, and the disconnect there was troubling. Matt's ultimate decision to not hire the candidate kept his character and values intact. I also shared with Matt Cass's code of ethics regarding hiring. Reviewing these standards allowed him to see that the dilemma could have been avoided had he utilized an established, vetted hiring practice, rather than going it alone. Ultimately, the decision is sound based on fair practice, but the situation lends itself for Matt to reflect on his development as an ally. Does being an ally mean hiring people of different backgrounds? Perhaps not, if that is the sole reason for hiring them. This seems a lot like a quota to me. Matt's hesitation and/or temptation to hire a candidate despite poor references because of his racial identity shows that he may want to explore further development in this area to avoid such an ethical hang-up in the future. And with that, I'll conclude the presentation. I look forward to hearing your case studies as well. Thanks.